misremembering, romanticizing about the way things used to be with fantasy football, how simple it was to be able to draft a number one running back and know that they're going to be the bell cow the entire season as long as they're healthy, or drafting a number one wide receiver and expecting them to remain the number one wide receiver all season. I haven't looked it up to see if that really was a consistent thing, 10, 20, 30 years ago. I'm imagining that it's become less consistent. I'm imagining that there's a lot more movement on depth charts these days. Um, who knows? There'll be another research project, or if you want to research it and let me know, I will mention your name on this podcast. And thank you for enlightening all of us. Um, I think this season is very interesting, and I'm going to go with the belief that what's happening this season is pretty unique compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago, in that we kind of have three groups of wide receiver cores. One group is the true number one wide receiver. We knew it in the preseason, and it's playing out that way. So Jackson Smith and Jigba in Seattle, number one going into the season. He was one of my favorites. As some of you might remember from my rankings, I had him as a huge bargain. Wish I had drafted him in the second round, but my opponents drafted him. One of my opponents drafted him a couple picks before. And I might be undefeated right now, to be honest, if I had gotten him, if he had fallen in my lap. There's other true number ones, and you go down the list, Justin Jefferson in Minnesota, and, now currently Jalen Waddle when Tyreek Hill got hurt. There's these guys that are they're the number one, and that's it. You know what you're getting into. Then there are the receiving cores where there is no real number one, and it doesn't really materialize. And I feel like this season it's happening more. Chicago is a good example of that. Is it DJ Moore or is it Rome Odunze? Will Luther Burden come on, and take on a co-number one role at some point? I don't know. But for now, between Moore and Odunze, it's getting a lot tougher. I mean, the preseason, it looked like Moore. And then by week 2, week 3, it looked like Odunze was going to run away with it. Now it's unclear. There's other receiving cores, if you look around the league, that are very complex. They were complex in September, and they're still complex. And then you get the receiving cores where there is a true number one, but that number one isn't really playing like a number one, at least in recent weeks. And it's happening frequently enough that we don't know if they're going to stay the number one, or the number one has been hurt, or in one case suspended. And we don't know if when they return, they will be the true number one. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I get the fact most of you would say, and I would say too, Jamar Chase is the obvious number one. But we have to remember last year, T. Higgins was the number 6 wide receiver in fantasy points per game, only 5 spots behind Jamar Chase. Now, it's a huge 5 spots, obviously. I mean, Jamar Chase is a cut above. But in the past several weeks that T. Higgins and Jamar Chase share the field, T. Higgins got more fantasy points, and in some cases got more targets. And so there is a possibility that once T. Higgins is healthy, I know he reportedly had what seemed like a concussion yesterday. Once he's healthy and he and Jamar Chase are on the field together, I don't know that we can say with 90% certainty that Jamar Chase is going to get more fantasy points than T. Higgins, which might sound strange, but there you go. Marvin Harrison Jr. And Michael Wilson, great example of Harrison Jr. struggling as the number one, but he is the number one, but he's still kind of struggling. He started to get that upswing with Jacoby Brissett under center, and then he had his appendix removed. Michael Wilson steps up. He was the preseason, I think he was the 80th ranked wide receiver. He was a bargain on my draft board. I thought he would have a realistic shot at the top 50 or 60, I can't remember, but it was somewhere in there. Basically draftable in very deep leagues. I didn't expect him to do what he's done the last couple of games. It's crazy to think about how dominant he's been, more dominant than Marvin Harrison Jr. So then the question becomes, when Harrison comes back, are we really that certain that he's going to be the number one? Or Would some argue that Wilson would be the co-number one? Would some even argue that realistically, or maybe there's a 60% chance that Wilson in any given game will score more fantasy points than Harrison? I don't know. We'll know more when the two are on the same field and, get another game under their belt under this new kind of way of looking at this team. As Jacoby Brissett is, he's got Trey McBride, but this is no longer a case of McBride, Harrison, and everyone else. It's going to be McBride, Harrison, and Wilson. And we just don't know yet whether Wilson is going to be the 1A or the 1B. He's a former, I think, second round pick or third round pick. I'd be slightly off on that, but he's a mid early round pick. He's not a slouch. It just happens to be that in his first couple seasons or whatever, he's been so-so at best, but not really that good. Zay Jones got hurt. Greg Dortch is the number 3. There was a path for Wilson to do well. It's just that Brissett and before him, Kyler Murray only had eyes primarily for McBride and Harrison. Now that Wilson's going off, we'll see if Wilson takes over. I think it's an odd situation and an exciting situation. And I have Harrison, and I can say objectively, it's an exciting situation to see what Wilson has done and what he might be able to do in that offense. And then you have, and I talked about this last week, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. I got a little pushback, which I always love on the blog. I'm always, and please call me out if I'm not, but I'm always respectful when somebody says, I don't think you're right. Sometimes I just let you all have the last word on that. Sometimes I share kind of why I think I'm right if I didn't think I articulated it well the first time. But I talked about last week why it's unclear that CeeDee Lamb is the absolute alpha in that receiving core. And that the previous, I guess it was the whole season that they played together between CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. They were neck and neck in targets, receptions. It was unclear. And the issue, the problem that I had with it was that CeeDee Lamb dominated in 2023, but he didn't dominate in any other year. He was great in other years, but didn't dominate. And now going into the season, he was playing with arguably the most talented receiver in his prime. You could say Amari Cooper in CeeDee Lamb's early stage of his career was just as good as Pickens. I would say Cooper was not. I think Pickens is better. And I would have said that a week ago as well. So you have this case of a very talented Pickens coming in, and suddenly CeeDee Lamb is no longer the unquestioned alpha. Maybe he's just the alpha, or maybe he's one of two alphas. And as a co-alpha, it's unclear in any given game who's going to be better. Yesterday, Pickens more than doubled, or almost doubled his targets. Or actually, they were neck and neck on targets. I think CeeDee Lamb had 2 more, but Pickens had 9 catches to Lamb's 4, and Pickens had almost double the receiving yards. Plus, Pickens had, a TD catch. It shouldn't have surprised people if you listened to my podcast last week that this is a 50-50 receiving core. It is not what many people would have thought in the preseason based on their average draft positions, an 80-20 or 90-10 receiving core where, let's say, CeeDee Lamb does better than George Pickens 80% of the time or 90% of the time. It's not going to be that. It really looks like a 50-50. And there is a reasonable possibility, and I think I mentioned this last week, whether it was on the blog or the podcast, there's a reasonable possibility that Pickens will be the better fantasy producer the rest of the season. So we're in this year right now, 2025 season, where I think it's unusual based on historical numbers that we're in this phase now where we've got, yes, some true number ones who are playing like number ones and no one's questioning it. And we have a lot of offenses where either the receiving core depth chart has been muddied since week 1, week 2, or it's on the verge of being muddied when guys come back from injury, suspension, whatever. That makes things excessively hard for managers because we want to know that the guys that we're starting have a certain pecking order. That makes things easier for us. If we know someone is a number 3 wide receiver, we can decide, I don't want to start this person because he's the number 3 wide receiver. And if someone's the number 1, we want to know, I'm starting this person because he's the number 1. He's probably going to get the most targets on the team. That's why I'm starting him. if we don't know that certain guys are going to be the most or even the second most targeted on a team, even though their average draft position suggested they would be, that wreaks havoc on our teams. I'm BJ Rudell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog. Email me anytime. Good luck if you've got any guys going tonight. We'll see you tomorrow.